Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I'm going to show you what climate propaganda looks like. The last big heat wave in the U.S. occurred 7 years ago in 2012. I remember that summer well. We had some big fires in Colorado, and Barack Obama came out and took full advantage of the crisis. His philosophy was, never let a good crisis go to waste. He visited some burned out areas near Colorado Springs and announced that big fires were the new normal for the state. But most of the years since then have been very quiet fire years here in Colorado, and people were skiing here yesterday. Climate scientists also took full advantage of the heat wave. Wednesday, July 4th, 2012. Scientists, this is what global warming looks like. This is certainly what I and many other climate scientists have been warning about. Jonathan Overpeck, University of Arizona professor. There was a big heat wave going on when he made that comment on July 4th, 2012, but as I'm going to show you, there were much bigger heat waves in the past. And the National Climate Assessment shows that the heat waves of 2012 were nowhere near as hot as many heat waves in the past, particularly before 1960. I attended a debate 2 years later at the University of Colorado in Boulder between Kevin Trenberth of NCAR and Judith Curry of Georgia Tech. Trenberth was in full climate rant mode, blamed the 2012 heat on global warming, and came right out and said the hot weather was the Republicans' fault. I talked to Judith Curry after the debate, and she described Trenberth's comments as propaganda. So let's look at some earlier heat waves from the first week in July. Overpeck's claim was made on July 4th, 2012. But July 4th, 1911 and several other years were considerably hotter than July 4th, 2012. And the same story with this date, July 5th. 1911 was much hotter than 2012. The 2012 heat wave was centered over the Midwest, but the Midwest has actually had 116 days prior to 2012 which were hotter than the hottest day of 2012. The highest temperature in the Midwest during the 2012 heat wave was 108 degrees. Temperatures were hotter in the Midwest in 1897, 1900, 1901, 1911, 1913, 1914, 1917, 1918, 1925, 1930, 1934. In 1936, the Midwest reached 118 degrees, 10 degrees hotter than the hottest temperature in 2012. And in 1934 and 1954, the Midwest reached 116 degrees. Obviously, Jonathan Overpeck is counting on the fact that few people remember that. The Midwest was also hotter in 1938, 1939, 1940, 1943, 1952, 1954, 1955, 1980, 1988, and 2011. So the heat wave of 2012 was certainly hot by modern standards, but compared to the past, it was much cooler than many summers we've had in the United States. According to the National Climate Assessment, as carbon dioxide has increased over time, the magnitude of heat waves has declined, as has the warmest temperature of the heat waves and the length of the heat waves. They've all declined sharply since the 1930s. Let's take a closer look at this date in 1911. There were 100-degree temperatures coast to coast. It was 105 degrees in Massachusetts. There were temperatures over 100 degrees in Vermont and New Hampshire. 6 states were over 110 degrees: Arizona, California, Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri. 30 states were over 100 degrees, and every state except for Rhode Island was above 90 degrees. Heat like we had this week in 1911 is completely incomprehensible now, and carbon dioxide levels were much lower, about 300 parts per million in the atmosphere. So for Jonathan Overpeck and many other climate scientists to say that the heat of 2012 is what global warming looks like is simply not true. What is true is that it's propaganda. These people are being paid to push a political agenda. This is called policy-based evidence-making. These academics are being paid to create data and make statements which serves a particular political agenda. And we know that they know what they're saying isn't true because it's right here in the National Climate Assessment. The heat wave of 2012 was nowhere near as hot as many heat waves in the past. It's critically important for policymakers in Washington to stop pretending that this is about science. This has nothing to do with carbon dioxide, and we need to get the message across to lawmakers in Washington, D.C. that the most important thing they need to be working on right now is revoking the CO2 endangerment finding of the EPA. That CO2 endangerment finding is based on junk science, and it gives unscrupulous people their foot in the door to seize control of U.S. energy policy. That CO2 endangerment finding is already being used by states extensively for carbon taxes, gasoline taxes, and all kinds of other terrible policy decisions which will hurt the citizens of our country in the future. The functioning of our country depends on a reliable supply of low-cost energy, including liquid fuels. Left up to the Democrats, our critical infrastructure will be destroyed. Voltaire said, "He who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." The absurdity is the CO2 endangerment finding, and it needs to be revoked. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.